welcome back. I forgot to turn that down. Okay. So we're going to talk about shallograms again. For anyone who doesn't know, maybe a quick summary of what's going on here. My interpretation is that these are formed by current flows of water that is transporting material of the shale as well as other materials found within the shallograms that are not just the black shale. So it's transporting these materials. It's water currents under pressure that then are caused to spiral in like a focal point to a focal point, like within an eddy, to a center that then compresses material into a rock, which is the shallogram itself. And then that current, though, flows atop the surface of the rock and at times can get into the rock and eddy within the rock. And that eddy then produces what we see as the ammonite. And all ammonites were produced by current flows in the same way and are not actually shells of living creatures. Okay. So, it generally, like, maybe I'll pull up an example real quick. Like, say here, it has a topside, in this case, just based on their size, typically this bottom face is larger, tends to protrude further, go out further, while this top can be smaller at times. But in this instance, they're pretty similar, possibly because of how it like opened rather than continuing in it like broke the side. I don't know. But so the current, though, will flow physically through the chakras, go down through the chakra, and then into this basin region, if you will, this bottom that contains the current. But then because there's current flowing down, it's pressuring this region. And then there's current wrapping around the stone, so it's holding the boundary of the stone. So what then occurs is a flow. It goes back to the top, from the bottom back to the top, and it flows through and cycles through. And at times, when it goes through, it doesn't go through, like especially what I interpret to be larger particles physically, like this to be subtle fine-grained particles, the black shale, and then the golden appearing material and other materials that tend to be concentrated around the ammonite are more able to be separated into the region of a spiral eddy that forms around here, around the chakras, as they're termed in Hinduism, where these stones are like most known. So let's go on. So this is the last one I did. So we're on 430 is another one that kind of opens like that. It's got this little U shape and then another U shape over here the opposite way that are not quite like this is in their nature. They look more like a surrounding a nucleus. This one especially. We got lots of shallograms. Let's see. So I guess that's looking at this face. possibly beyond, like way back there, I guess, where it another face, kind of around like a bulging region of the rock. Like also here would be one, here would be one, down here, some kind of like extension within the rock. In this case, it looks to have formed, like wrapped around it like a pole. It has a channel between here and a channel here, possibly. That would suggest possibly this black shale material had a flow into this region, and then a flow from this side into this region, creating this boundary. I'm not sure. Just a thought that around here, the shale was like prevented from also crossing through this region. Kind of like the last episode, these ones like this, how it has this barrier. So the shale goes through this one specifically to get to here, to fuel this region so that it doesn't become like this. And that flows all the way back from over here, which then I guess is fueled from like the bottom face with this separator. So it's almost like a point where the current generally goes this way and in to fuel, and then a point where the current actually goes outward and holds a further boundary and kind of produces a mound like over here that fades as it restarts, especially in this region, to become more sloped downward because it's been pushing this way to compress against resistance and extend into the resistance in a more dendritic way that has. So maybe something of that nature with the way this boundary is forming. Okay, this is another really just big shallogram. Just a big one. We can't see inside of it. It's 10 inches, 9 inches. It's huge. Can't see inside of it. So let's just go through the images real quick. This is so cool. Oh, that's so cool too. So many features. Oh, okay. We got H. Okay. Okay, let's go back here though. So we've got these things going across. We've got features this way, features this way, kind of perpendicular to one another. You can see scratches here, kind of relating to these maybe, and then down this way though. Not sure if those are related to what's on top. That might actually be coming from within. Like, kind of like this, but doing it below the surface here. I don't know. But notice, so cool about this one, what I love about the big ones, even when you can't see inside of them like this, there's still so many features on them, like this here, space, boom, space, boom, space, boom, space, boom, space, boom, wrapping around towards here, and then the gold stops. Where the gold stops, this like missing region begins. I don't know why that would be exactly. kind of pointy up there. Suggestive, whatever's in here kind of has like one of the ends of the spiral here as well. Like it goes around and has like that. So, like a subtle circle there too, near the pole, the drainage point. Basically it drains down through, but depending on how capable it is to drain through, different circumstances emerge. In this case, it looks like it drained through pretty well in like a balanced way, so it has a relatively flat top where like the flow is coming from the bottom up through across this like connection point into this region and refueling this. I believe this is the top. Let's make sure the other side looks more bottom-like. Yeah, much bigger. Like a container holding more of the material down here. It goes possibly further out. Yeah. Like this looks like it kind of has a top. The top tends to have a small, like this could be more like this even on a lot of them, where it has like a small channel here. Possibly related even to why this is there, because there's like a dominant current coming through this way and like a recessive current over here that can get like cut off completely as the this one, how it becomes more of this shape, and even this starts to happen in this case. And the chakra is actually pretty close to the, like, around the front there, it seems. I mean, it looks like it. Like it's about there, so maybe on the top side it's about there. Underneath this extension piece, like within the mouth of the snake, like right at the center of the mouth itself. On the top of the mouth, where it's like a coiled snake around it, with the bottom just being like a tail that wraps around. I don't know if I'm not even sure there is an image of the bottom of this. If there is, I don't know why I don't have it. But like wraps around and then has a tail that like reaches into the chakra, and it is fueled through the body, back through the top and down through. I'm not sure why it would go like not through the mouth. Through the booty, not through the mouth. I don't know. Okay. So this is probably the top face, like in terms of when it formed. When they form, they have a top and bottom, probably like gravitationally. Like the face, that gravity is pushing downward, creates more of the bowl. And then the top face is where the current overflows, but is contained within the boundaries of the shallogram, and caused to go up and around to the top and cycle in an ammonite shape. Okay. So we can see the features around there pretty nicely. That's cool. Around here. This crack across, like, goes right across the adjacent to, not like through the center, but actually adjacent to, which probably is like central to what was happening is there's a current going generally across here, and then a current going across here, like we can see here, a narrow current like going especially across here, and then a wide current just generally going across, that then collide and then starts to produce an eddy, which then I guess is held with within, like if there's a narrow current and then a wide current like flowing, then maybe around the center, like the center, a node is able to stably form where like an eddy forms. So it's like held at the actual pressure point between the two currents, like their focal collision point, and able to form a spiral there, but like be basically a current flow that's held by another current flow that almost like prevents, possibly like prevents other than water from passing through and filters the water, kind of like Earth does, but in this case like a stream, and literally like concentrates the materials of the shallogram to then spiral and coalesce into, out of like a gas cloud into a star kind of thing. That would be so cool. But we can see this here, I guess, is relatively parallel to this, so it's probably not just like an individual stream in either case, but like more like multiple streams and multiple streams that just have especially dominant channels that they take. Like here's a channel that they dominantly take, but here's some as well. And maybe even because the shallograms, like we're like dropping through it, it's what's going across this way maybe is also more able to influence down here at like the center plane, because it's probably also forming not just at like the one between the fingers there to hold it like in a way where it spirals, but also between the fingers like this way, so it like pinches the above and below it. So it's probably these ones holding it along this axis, and then this one flowing across that's going above and below, holding it like this, like a sandwich, but then like holding it again across these ones that then give it like a resistance necessary to coalesce. Okay, let's keep looking at this thing. I'm not sure what to make of that exactly. That might make more sense if we had like a window in, but I mean, since this is the top, like, since we don't have a window in, that means like it's forming like up here, like at this boundary, but way out here atop it. Basically it's forming atop it, like especially because we see it even in the matrix itself. Interesting that it's in the matrix here, not part of the ammonite seemingly, like it's elevated, it's lifted in the mound, while the ammonite itself is kind of pinching in to a focal point. but it also, the material extends into the ammonite. So this gold that is like spaced goes up into, and no, it's not gold, it's just gold colored, goes up into the top of the ammonite of the shallogram. Sorry, so many words that are gonna. Ammonite is the fossil that is induced by the currents, and the shallogram is the stone as a whole. But yeah, it literally, cleanly and with distinct boundaries, protrudes into this. Like, what world does just random fossilization induce this? It would be one thing if all this gold color was in the ammonite, but because it's in the matrix and the ammonite, like if it's also in just the matrix, it's more reasonable. But we see distinctly it's in both right here, and then only in one over here. And in a spiral shape, like incredible. Like it's actually in a spiral shape. Possibly spiraling in. Possibly. Like this is... like a backward current, which we talked about before, where because there's different materials in the water flowing, different grain sizes, especially different masses, some are more easily movable than others, and so they move faster than others. So the black shale, which is, I believe, just based on its appearance, it's much more fine-grained, composed of a material that was more subtle at its base, that then was coalesced into the shallogram's like matrix. But then within that flow are larger grain particles that move slower in the water. And so like if you're driving and a car drives past you, in your point of view, you're moving in one direction and they are approaching you and then moving past you, like going in that direction. But in their point of view, like you're approaching them and going like backwards. So there's this actual differentiation relative to one another in the direction of motion that each observe the other doing. So that could, I would say, produce like an actual backward current of the like larger material into the ammonite in a way that this shallogram really reveals that it's happening, where it's bringing these like it reminds me of the caterpillar marching episode I did about flood. Like I forget if it's the Hars. I think it was the Hars. Yeah. So, caterpillar marching is the Har video where it literally is like a caterpillar marching, where it brings the lead boulders forward to a point, and then they like stop moving, and the wave of this flow builds up behind them. until there's enough pressure, and then they move. But then that extends the like material that's compressing against it. It gives it space to extend like an accordion, so that it basically no longer applies as much pressure to those leading boulders. So they then stop again, and then the flow behind it then continues forward to again build pressure and like compresses again, and then it pushes the leading boulders forward that are kind of building this wall, preventing like the full flow from occurring. So it literally marches. I would say there's something of this nature where like a certain capacity to form these things is being met, where like it builds up, it builds up, it builds up, and then they like have enough material that it gets like pushed forward. Push forward or out. I don't know if I said that right. Trying to think exactly how it would work here. Something to do with like it forms it until it energetically doesn't need to anymore, and then does it in a pixelated manner. I'm just thinking these are bigger. This is large. This is smaller. This is maybe larger than this one, but smaller than this one. So, and then these are smaller than this one, and also they're more rounded, and this becomes more square and more elongated, and then more elongated and wide. This one's also in line with this crack, so maybe that's got something to do with it being not in sequence here. Like it was more eroded by a cross current. Also some kind of like diamond looking stuff all through this. Just all over it. Maybe like a current flow in that then is caused to like V out too by interacting with this one. Creates these like diamond patterns. That's interesting. Let's get going. It does look like possibly some chambers visible in there or something. Also these little features. It's almost like dissecting it at the same time. Those might be related to the undercurrents that are basically flowing in and then atop the in, down, and around. Looks like a Millennium Falcon. It's kind of angled up on that image. Like it's way more angled than it looks on this one. This one looks almost like... This looks like it goes up almost like that from this image. especially with some bending to it. It looks maybe even bending towards the gold. I don't know if this makes any sense from a fossil standpoint. Like right here, we can kind of see little dendritic fingers like overlaying this material here, almost like is flowing and like putting out pressure points and overlaying here the ammonite itself. But this material is like part of the matrix, and yet has these dendrite things, like distinctly looking geological. And then this divide here, this looks almost not sloped correctly, like it does something like that. Let's see. And yet these fractures go cleanly through all of the layers. This goes arbitrarily across, and yet this has teeth back here, as well as something going on there. I guess this is one of those big peg type things of the dendrites. This side didn't form like this side, it got kind of influenced. It almost looks like that peg thing has a lobe of a shallogram type structure off of it. Like a rattlesnake tail. That would be cool if the tail of the snake actually went up through the bottom and then into the ammonite shape and out to the very tip here, where it then had like a rattlesnake tail off of the spine. Very cool. Like, what? Straight fractures and then bend, straight bend. Little seashell-esque features, but not so completely formed as to just look like one, which kind of resembles this. Very odd that this is there and that is there. This is like a void and then a mount, like this nub feature, which might be the first protruding nub type feature I've seen of that nature on a shallogram. In terms of like Montana megalith nubs. They're not of this nature, they're more just rounded nubs. But, and the nubs that are on like ancient constructions. Very cool. I guess this could be the top because it has that. Tops do tend to have little caps. It's a little off center though, to a point where it's like the cap usually is related to the center of the ammonite. This looks almost like it got shoved. The current was generally going this way and just caused it to like I probably did that the wrong direction. Okay. Alright, so this one's incredible. This one I think I just took it because it has anomalous shapes, like irregular. These are not easily explainable by any fossil because they're not symmetrical really. Like what's going on here, what's going on here. Currents do this, fossils do not. Boundary here that like this resistance, essentially a current, was generally here seemingly, and perhaps even like pushing into a current flowing this way that then caused it to bend, but at its like peak, like the strongest resistance was over here, so it made it through the lesser currents and was caused to deflect at the strongest current that could actually prevent it, and it went back this way and created this feature as well as this feature by their interactions, because then there's turbulence which causes the current to like duck down, but it actually flowing into the rock in a way where balance, like this is the path that it could take, but then it fanned out a bit, and created like chambers to help squeeze it through and around, like a lake, like the Great Lakes. Like a flow goes through and then it runs into resistance here, and the only way it can get through this resistance is by opening more space and like applying more pressure, like we were just talking about pretty much with the Lahar flow, and then it breaks through that resistance, but then it hits more resistance down here, which then leads to just this space filling more, and then it breaks through the resistance and is able to like bend in. Now it's like more so being just bent by this current. So I would say it flowed this way, not this way, and this way, not this way, and interacted, then causing it to bend back and back this way. And then this space had some flow going in. So maybe there's a flow that went in here and like held this boundary. Ultimately, a flow of shale where the boundary itself was more like faster flow rate, so it was more water based. Other face, okay, we kind of looked at this one before, where it just has these smeared out chambers. Smeared out chambers, some features around it. This one's real interesting because it's the first one that it really brought to mind a different one. Let's go back up here. This one, which is just incredible. Ammonite up there, ammonite down here. They're like this though. Like stacked this way. One's like flat, one's angled this way. It brought to mind that one. So let's go back to this. It has this protrusion here, this spiral down, 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 and around. So it looks relatively like it. I mean, it's not the same ammonite structures, but it just has this little extending portion here. Notice how the discoloration from just the dark material is generally near the center of the ammonites. It gets in. This is interesting. It just cuts through, bends, like there's a current bending it. Like it's bending from a general current wrapping around, but then a current that went through across here at this boundary and went through and then bent and then fanned out. Not sure exactly why I would have this spacer type thing. Maybe it actually bent, fanned out, and went under and then out. And like this shale maintained a connection while it did that. And created this outlet path. Kind of like the one that we looked at in the last video, this one. This one. That's bending, but has this containing it, this little overlay thing. So there's like a flow going through it. And in a vortex way to produce these layers, but then it starts to bend here and be more ammonite-like, but it has this like strong connection across so that it doesn't form, like it doesn't basically continue to open and continue to open to a point where there's a chakra and a chakra holding the connection and then separating. Because if that happens, then an ammonite is more likely to form than what we saw in the rock. Like that, the same rock would have been found looking like a more typical ammonite shape, like having these features, I would suggest. It's almost like it's forming discs. Like in this case, it's forming discs that. Let's pull up some other shellograms. Nozzle, kind of like these discs. In that one, it goes wide, narrow, wide. Probably because it has that like imbalance of that. Like this does it too, where it's imbalanced. Like the shale didn't maintain a connection. This one's imbalanced. The shale didn't maintain a connection. But it also has like a almost like a most influenced, like it could have become chakras, but it got too spaced apart and didn't maintain a connection. That one's broken open, but these broken open, I don't know, broken open, I think. I'm fairly certain these have Although they look kind of smooth, so maybe these were found like this. They probably broke open. Like, this is smooth in terms of its flowing. This is much more like broken open. Whether or not it happened before or after the process was done, it probably happened while the shallogram was forming, because there's a lot of current going through here and it just burst. But these all got broken open. Whether or not someone did it, irrelevant. So, even in this case, though, it's still forming disk layers. It's just those disks are doing is laying atop one another, like kind of like this one, where they're staggered like this, just over and over in a way that it wraps in a circle. Or in a spiral, sorry, not a circle. A spiral. And induces an actual ammonite shape. Like, it's the same mechanics are in all of them, with the disk as like a basic unit. Okay, let's see. We just have those two images. Not much we can see into it, so really just this feature, this crack. There's certainly other stuff, I guess, these things. It's just, we can't see them any better. Some cross currents that are pretty clear here. Looks like this is maybe the top face, or maybe the bottom face, and a current was like flowing into it, but it was kind of like creating a narrowing, so the current just had to like drill into it. It didn't, like, whatever was above it had enough pressure to force the current into here, and then it kind of went across like that. But it, in the meantime, made this less of a bowl and more having this thing here where current just kind of came in, etched across there, and like removed material. Created some kind of swirl that just like extracted the material as in the meantime without actually differentiating it. So that it even has like a sort of chakra thing forming in there on the top of it. Maybe. I mean, these chambers, like, upheaval dome. Like a chamber. That then the flow can flow into and push out boundaries while also creating a upheaval core. Kind of like that. Okay. I wonder if upheaval dome has anything like this. Let's see if I can find it. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. Alright, I give up. Look, wrong side of it. Maybe there. Like if a current flowed in here and pushed material while a current's flowing out here, holding a boundary, kind of creating this chamber. Like it would probably just kind of cut across as well. That's cool. What? Whoa, dude. There's rainbows in the image. It's real. There's rainbows at Upheaval Dome. Why is it like that? What is happening in this image? Oh my god, what if it's shadows that genuinely had effects like that? I've never seen that in a Google image. What the okay, let's find... let's move away from there and find some shadows. Yeah, that's more normal. That's more typical. Go back over here, maybe find some shadows here. Oh, there's some in there. I don't know. Anyway, so that's going on here. Let's keep going. Also, those were kind of around Upheaval Dome. Not to jump away from Upheaval Dome, because it is kind of interesting to compare like that. There. These ones go that way. Oh. That way, that way, that way, that way, that way. Connecting there, pretty much. But then, up here, they start going this way. This way. Pretty much to, like, over there, maybe. Then it looks like possibly they start to angle away there, like, away. But there's really none. Okay, there's some going sideways. That would kind of make sense. Over here, they're like fanning out. Like fanning out, fanning out. And then back before that, they're like maybe doing that. Looks like only there, really. That way and that way. That even looks like current flows. Like in the ocean. There. Like a current went up and came back, maybe. Whoa. This clearly just had intense currents flowing through it. To say that time plus erosion plus coincidence to explain these things is so cheating. Kind of like the Big Bang. There's this, I might have mentioned it already. This is ridiculous. I keep seeing it. It's getting like shared. I see YouTube videos about it now. Possibly because of who's been talking about it. Just incites people to talk about what they're talking about. It's kind of like a jump on the bandwagon to get some attention, pretty much. We're all trying to get attention, I understand. For different reasons, maybe, but same reasons still, also. If we have something to say, like, that makes sense. It's just for the sake of it. It's kind of like, dear God, get yourself together, man. This is incredible. Clearly current flows etching in, running into resistance, and building mounds, but also building containers where pressure of the current held the space. Okay. So this one, just we already talked about it, actually. Pretty cool. Talked about it in the last one, though. Talked about this one. How it's pretty much... This one, if we go to the other side. Let's get to the back side. Like, it's clearly one shallogram. It's one rock, right? It's, like, formed as one unit. And then within that unit, it has sort of like a nucleus center thing, but like my thought, as I mentioned before, is that this like chunk was actually pushed out of the way and new material filled the space. And that material then became shaped to a degree, but it's only the process stops, so we don't see like we don't see this like ejected, the nucleus core ejected and a new core being formed. But it seems to be in a process that it was happening in this case. This one has the butter knife slicing underneath, like stripping the next layers. I might have talked about this one already too. Very much like this one. I think I talked about it though. With the nub. Smooth but etched. I love it when they're like this. Like the ammonite itself is kind of just like the rock, but not. Divide there kind of happening. Divide there, a little chunk maybe, a half. Yeah, that's pretty much a half. In this case, it's like it's taking that half off, but didn't. How's that music doing? Okay, we got 8 minutes. Alright, alright. This is just anomalous. There's some more drainage points. I think I already pointed and talked about this one a little bit, but those drainage points have this thing, which actually points to that too. And then this wraps around and kind of points to over there where this boundary is, as well as this coloration. Possibly something in this, like here, this region that's kind of deteriorated relative to this side. And this thing, possibly some relationship there, as well as this. Like maybe this happened because of some relationship there, where generally there's currents intersecting that are then inducing the ammonite and the shallogram as a unit, forming it. This also has sort of like a chakra and a lobe a little bit, just subtly. Not like the most distinguished shape, so I understand if people are like, ugh. Although I disagree with that. This makes me think of this ammonite from Diamond Miner Ivers? I forget, sorry. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, it's the first one. Ammonite with these bubbles after, like it no longer stably could form the disc here, so the disc started to get like laid out over here as individual units. In this case, maybe like the center had some aspect of that happening. I don't know, it's not like coming off the end of the ammonite. But just by the way this is, and kind of connects back. Or it's just pointing to a current flow that went across here and bent. And here, maybe. Possibly went around here, bent like that. As well as bending like that, as well as bending like that. Like this is certainly connected to this. That and this. Just then go across there and across there. Looks like it also connects back to maybe a more influenced region. Possibly a flow going around this way also that it feeds into and joins over here. Influencing there. Okay, I think that's all of that one. Checking if the earlier pictures had anything after looking at it. Not especially. Okay. So we talked about this one. I mean, it's just pretty much another one with a bunch of chambers that are visible that then got current flows because it was still under the currents, and I guess got it exposed to currents that eroded the top away, so then I've just cross-sectioned it, removed the material, exposed it, and then filled in the chambers with like forming these structures afterwards in the process, I guess. Places where like larger materials got dropped out and an eddy formed, generally pushing it to the boundary of the chamber. Maybe bunch of anomalies on here. Like, why are there teeth out here? Here's an ammonite that should be spiraling around this way, like this way. The teeth should be going around in a spiral, like back to the core. But they go out there, off of the spiral though that's doing this, which makes no sense that it even does that in the first place. Off of that though are these other teeth. This thing makes no sense. From a shallogram or fossils standpoint, it makes sense from an ammonite or eddies, induced by eddies standpoint. I guess it's kind of reflective of how dendrites can form, like with wobbly within the paths outward that then form dendritically, but it's really just waves, like teeth, just like that form other places. It's not really doing the dendrite because it's just forming these waves. Very abnormal, like it typically would form a dendrite. Maybe it's just got so much material over here, like this face where it would have wrapped around and had less space for this current to like stretch out in, because this is basically a current that's in so much resistance that it bends and bends and bends and bends and folds and becomes dendritic. But in this case, it only needed to bend so much that it became like teeth. Like these are bending too. When this happens, it's because the current is bending at those points. Oh yeah. Let's go to here. I'm so glad I did this. Like this one. Like there's a current wrapping around this rock. Just wrapping around like a single belt. But that belt does not fit on this rock. So in order for that belt to lay atop the surface of this rock, it needs to fold. And it does so on the other side, just in a wave pattern. But on this face, it just folds like crazy like and creates this structure, as well as there's a current from like the pole to the pole. It's like wrapping around and like pushing up this way and creating a dendrite there and just applying like more pressure up this way. So it just creates these structures here, as well as like here, it's wrapping around, but also creating dendrites for no reason, no apparent reason, because it's not an ammonite. This is not an ammonite. This is wrapping around the stone, so it's no reason. But in this case, it's just elongated enough that it formed more teeth-like, and really shows the relationship between the processes, where dendrites are just really folded and bent waves. Wow, makes me think of like dendritic light. That will be so cool. Okay, guys, I imagine that whatever music is, 2 minutes of paradise. Okay, hopefully that doesn't get completely on this video then. Fuck. So I'm done for now. I'll be back. I got a bunch more. I gotta stop there though. But we're on 141. See ya soon. I'm gonna try to finish these today. Alright. Later.